On the negative side, the inflation lockdown that began 12 months ago is still bearing down very heavily on the consumer. Sentiment is still at very bleak levels. We've only seen weaker reads during the darkest days of the early 90s recession, and we're starting to see more signs that this pressure is starting to bite with incomes and spending behaviour. The last 6 months we've seen consumers start to dip into their pandemic reserves. About $260 billion that was accumulated during lockdowns in 2020 and 2021. They've run down about $20 billion of that already, and they're starting to use that to buffer against these pressures. Spending wise, things have stalled in the first quarter. They may have gone backwards in the second quarter. Our card tracker is pointing to an outright decline quarter to quarter, maybe about 0.5%. And while wider spending measures may hold up, that weakness looks to be carrying into the July month. It does point to more pressures coming through in the third quarter. When we're looking for positives, I think the main ones are around the inflation updates we're getting. We've clearly passed the peak for inflation in Australia, and the signals coming from offshore, particularly in the US, are pointing to quite a rapid deceleration in inflation, and so the news should gain momentum on that front locally as well. Expectations around prices, consumer price expectations, have also been relatively well behaved, and that should hopefully move lower as well. And so the prospect of a return to low inflation still looks pretty good, but we're going to have to come through a bit more interest rate pressure before we get to an improving cycle for the consumer. So while the worst of the inflation may have passed, it may be some time yet before we can say the same for the Australian consumer.